Hey guys, good afternoon. My name is Eddie Satterley. I'm the CTO for the Emerging Business Group at CSC. What that means is I get all the cool stuff. So I have security, big data, analytics, cloud, IoT, social mobile, all that cool stuff falls under my group. I run the technology teams from a research and development background. So we're going to talk today a little bit about some of the stuff that CSC's been doing with Amazon, building some accelerators to be able to get to a better innovation step through using DevOps approaches. I have a little bit of experience in the DevOps space. If you look at my background, I've done this a little bit over the years. So really it starts off with just setting up the problem space, right? There's businesses are having a really hard time keeping up, especially larger enterprise businesses that are working under old paradigms. They're having a lot of issues recruiting new talent. They're having a lot of issues getting new products to market and going through using the heavy processes that they have in place. And on top of that, the traditional IT frameworks at a lot of these companies do not make it easy for you to be able to do anything new. To take agile approaches is even very difficult, and there's a number of conversations about that here, but just not being able to innovate in any meaningful way because of the processes and things that have been put in place over time. And it's really created lots of issues, the shadow IT or whatever else you want to call it, right? But these things are going on every day. And really, in order to make this all work, and just out of all honesty, from CSC's perspective, probably 85 to 90% of our customers are those IT people. Right, so we're trying to help them find a way to bridge this gap and make this work, and really find a way to be more flexible, be able to get stuff done a lot faster. We'll do the quick obligatory definition slide. So, when we think of DevOps, we think about it as a way to be able to do things faster, do it more agilely, get things out quicker, be able to bring software to bear, offer new services, new paths to revenue, whatever that is, without having to get rid of the quality issues, right? I can push code to production faster under any model, and the number of defects I push create massive problems. So when you break it down to the two components that bring this together, right, you have developers. Developers always want to get their stuff out there faster. They want to try the coolest new frameworks. They want to get every piece of code into production as fast as they possibly can, and that QA thing is kind of well, we should do that if we can. And I run a lot of development teams, so there's gating things that have to happen. I was a developer once. I always want to do the same thing. So that's their drive, their mission. I want to do the coolest, newest thing and get it in production as quickly as possible. IT operations folks that come from the legacy side of how things were run always want to put a block in the way and try to make things take longer and go through more processes and sign off 18 different places because they know they're going to get blamed first. When it goes live, it's absolutely not the developer's code that broke everything, although it was running perfectly yesterday and today it doesn't run at all. It's definitely the ops guys because they messed up the server config or something. So they're used to being blamed for everything, so they try to make it harder, put these things in place. Bringing the two things together lets you create a far more interesting approach. It gets people to think in that I have to balance these things appropriately and make it work to where we can get stuff out faster. There's only one group of people to blame, and if you look at some of the work that I did when I was at Expedia, get rid of the blame conversation, right? Bring it all together, make it one team. So the guy sitting next to you, if it's his fault, you all report to the same manager. It's all your fault. When it comes to bonusing people and people getting paid on stuff and all those things that people actually care about, if you're on the same team that's not performing, it doesn't really matter who you blame, you're still wrong. So really what DevOps brings you, right? Shortening all the cycles and getting things out there without defects, because when the developer has to be the guy who spends the weekend getting his code pushed out, it will have far less defects, I promise you, because he would like to be home by 7 o'clock Friday night, not 3 a.m. Saturday morning when these pushes happen, and I've had that exact experience more than once. So shortening these cycles down, getting development out, being able to go into dev test environments, testing, do A/B testing, getting the experience testing part done, and being able to get it deployed out to the groups faster. And you will force defects to go down just from the fact that these people, like I said, do not want to have to be the guy keeping it running. So there's lots of these little diagrams. there are lots of ways that you can get started in the space. There's lots of things you can do that will help you get there, secondary platforms, pre-production environments, and being able to do development externally, being able to move a lot of your processes to a more agile approach, lots and lots of buzzwords and things that can be done. But really, when you look at it, this first step is really just about how do I move stuff between platforms? How do I actually get stuff to the infrastructure quicker and test it either in an A/B fashion or test it in a parallel environment, or at least make sure that I'm getting a full test cycle and the code done in a faster way and pushed out using kind of common frameworks and tools. The problem with this approach is that it's still a completely separate, disjointed life cycle. It's just, you're not saving the time you need to do to get it out quicker, and it still takes a whole lot of resources to take this approach. When you start looking at the whole infrastructure as a service, or whatever you want to call it, that helps you somewhat, right? Because you now don't have to worry about rebuilding the OS on this or making sure this is patched to that level, and because you have a common kind of way to configure underlying applications, and there's a lot of components here that are leveraged very heavily by CSC and our customers on the AWS side, and being able to get this stuff out quicker, make it run faster, and be able to use some of the common controls. This solves your first problem, right? It gets you to the point where you're no longer worried about your infrastructure and all the components there, but it still creates the bottleneck of getting stuff out. So, wonderful Forrester developer survey that went out about what application developers want access to, and 79% of them want access to the app server. This is not a model that works under several controls for developers to have access without this DevOps excuse to do it. Web servers, databases, being able to get to the actual components is, their number one ask. There's, 2% said they didn't want anything. 47% want access to JVM, mostly so they can put some kind of cool tweak in there and use memory a little better, or change garbage collection or something fun. But what the approach that CSC has taken, and CSC bought a company called Service Mesh, have a product called Agility, and now it's rebranded to CSC Agility Platform. It's basically a policy engine that you basically build your SLAs around the applications. You build blueprints for the applications, and then you can push them out to the infrastructure, whether it's on AWS, or whether it's on a private cloud or dedicated infrastructure, or wherever else you're going to go with it. But it takes away the question about how do I deal with the policies and enforcement and all of those things around the environments and make sure that I'm getting the SLAs that are required by it. How do I set the right thresholds to scale up an environment? How do I create alerts? How do I do bursting capacity? How can I auto-provision an entire stack? Because I need these stacks stood up, not just one server, but I need a web farm with 1,500 servers. I actually need the middleware tier, I need the messaging bus, and I need the database. How do I get all that done in a single burst? And that's what Agility's platform is designed to do. So basically, this is the, where does AWS live, or where does the Agility platform play on top of? So when you look at AWS, it provides resources, right? It gives you resource capabilities, resource monitoring, resource pools. It gives you the infrastructure, right? Those whole sets of components are down there. Agility has connectors for that and many other ways to connect, and then does a management platform on top of it, where you start looking at orchestration and governance and provisioning out application stacks, not just an application. And there's, in a slide or two, there's kind of a definition of some of the tools that are used heavily by customers that are really in the DevOps space. But this enables you to take the DevOps work you've done, put it into a policy-based governance SLA system, and be able to push it out. Right, so I've built all these really cool Puppet scripts, and I have a ton of Jenkins tests, and I have Git repos with all my code, and I have all this stuff that I know that it takes, and then I built a blueprint that says these all map together, and this is how I get a stack, and then I deploy it out somewhere, and I make sure that I've deployed the right amount, that I'm handling the right capacity, and that everything's all governed under that model with the Agility platform. And on top of this, obviously, CSC has the AWS managed services that give you everything above it to make sure that everything is up and running as a service. So the money slide, in my opinion, this one and the next one, when you're talking about this, customers are going to have a mixed environment, right? They're going to have various infrastructure and cloud components. They're going to have various things going on. In this case, CSC Biz Cloud, which vBlock-based private cloud sitting in somebody's data center, whether it's CSCs or customers. They're going to have AWS, right? They're going to be doing test dev. They're going to be doing their web infrastructure, that outer layer that touches the customer, because they need to be able to touch customers in Singapore and customers in Europe and customers across the Americas, and they want to have that point of presence closer to the customer to do that tier. But mostly because security people are a bit paranoid. You know, there's all these barricades and buffers that people want to put in place, real or otherwise, to make sure that people aren't taking more things to a shared infrastructure or cloud environment than they need to. So let's keep this part of our stack all over here in our cloud, and then let's be able to burst stuff up and control where it happens, right? If I burst my web tier because I have more users using my site and buying things, that's a good thing. And that season's coming up starting in about 2 weeks from now. And in that case, I want to be able to burst up my web tier. I'm going to do that in Amazon. I also need to burst up my database. I'm going to do that in the private cloud. You know, however this all rolls out from doing the build out of it, it's the capability to basically be able to do this, to burst this up and control everything from a template type environment using common tools. So blueprints, like I talked about, this is how it works, right? So there's a ton of tools that can exist up here in the nice purple band, which I love the color scheme for this, but that can exist up here, development environments, you know, bug tracking in Jira, doing Jenkins for integration testing, Gits for repos. I mentioned Puppet already, and that's on one of the other slides, but you've got all these pieces that are built by your DevOps guys, right? They've built 50 Puppet scripts to manage how stuff's deployed, and you know, I run our big data team as well, and we have about 35 different Puppet scripts that manage our big data deployments across the board. We check them all back into Forge. It's all open source stuff. But we have 2,000 or so Jenkins tests that are deployed with every environment that's done. We have Jira instances that are open to customers and internally. We have private and public repos. They're running the environment, right? And the blueprint brings all that stuff together to deploy the stack, right? I want my dev cluster with data that's been scrubbed and Hadoop, and then I want a production Hadoop cluster, and then I want to install Cassandra over here for my OLTP, and I want to install MongoDB sharded so I can handle all these document interchanges that happen between me and partners. And I want to build all of that stuff out, right? How do I build that as a stack that solves a problem? You build a blueprint, right? You wrap a blueprint around it using the blueprint builder, and it's simplified and easy, the GUI version, so it can be done by those other than your normal infrastructure guys. And you build this blueprint, it's repeatable. It's got many, many components to it, right? Because now I want to put a web server on it. Like I was running maybe Elasticsearch and I want Kibana in there so I can do visualization. And I want to put some components in AWS and some components on dedicated infrastructure because maybe I need another Hadoop cluster that's storing sensitive customer data and I want to keep it behind my firewall in my environment. All of that can be orchestrated with a single deal. And in this case, maybe all of my development environments, all of my test environments, all of my UAT environments, all of them are deployed in Amazon because it's the best, most effective way to get this infrastructure up and down and change environments around and get all that working. But then when it comes to operate, as I mentioned, some of them may be in Amazon, some of them may be some place else because of rules or policies or compliance reasons. So, you know, all of these deployment blueprints move along the path, right? It's not like they have to be different. They're just at different scales, they're done differently, but it's the same application stack being deployed. And when you build it, you basically use this nice pretty GUI. I love having GUIs. Doing it the hard way was really not that much fun. So GUIs will make it much easier for people to do today, and it can be done by a much larger audience. You know, I always say so easy, the PM can do it. Like that's my goal for any technical project is I want to take a non-technical PM and make the guy go through my documentation and deploy everything. And this is one of those things that it's really built to be made that easy, right? So someone can read your document, figure out what needs to be done, and get it done. And then you can decide what components you need and where it needs to be deployed. All on the wrapper thing. And when we're talking about the service I was just talking about with big data, you know, we're going to deploy some of that in different places. So Agility is sitting in the middle, right? We have our internal private biz cloud, right? We have external private cloud with AWS. We know where we want all our workloads to go, right? In the case we just defined, we don't really have an external private. We're not interested in that. We're going to use our internal private for the sensitive data store, and we're going to put everything else in AWS because it's the right place for it. It's cost effective and it works. So we build the policies that basically govern where these instances run, how we burst them, and how they're stood up, all using standard SDLC tool chains. Right? We talked about some of those, but your standard framework pieces. I'm going to blow past a couple slides because it takes too long to talk. So you essentially build control points, right? You build a management platform. Your cloud management platform, Agility, is a governance deal. You've got policies. You're enforcing policies at every level, from the application to the underlying platform to the infrastructure it's running on. And you're making sure that all of your AAA stuff is set up correctly, that the right people are tied in and the right components are made available to the application. And then another money slide, right? You want to promote your code, right? This has always been the hardest part. Even building stuff 2 or 3 years ago without tools like this. You know, the hardest part's always, okay, well, I've got it in a dev environment now. I know the code works. I've been through all my integration tests, all my Jenkins stuff passed. I know this is all working beautifully. I want to now promote it to test. Okay, well, test is a totally different environment. It's built over here. They'll reinstall, rebuild, put the code over here, and then inevitably some developer changed something in the code and checked it in without going through the process, and now I've deployed a different version of code. The way to do it here is, you know, be able to do all of that control, put it all in the blueprint so you know when something is different, when things have been deployed, and you literally promote it through the environments as the necessary things have cleared, right? You've done the right integration tests at the basic level. I now want to go to user acceptance test. I may even do a live A/B testing scenario, right, where I want to test some of my users that I know are more patient to my failures. I want to point them to this experience of my website, and I want to keep the rest of them on the standard experience to just see how it goes, right? Are they buying more? Are they buying less? Are they searching more? Are they having to filter more? And you use the UI to basically do your release automations, right? So you have the right checkpoints in place, the right things have been done, and you have an actual UI to move your code into production. So it takes that whole complicated DevOps process of moving things through and makes it, again, easy in a UI. So you can have release managers that don't have to be developers. So orchestration, the key underlying tool for, or the key underlying form for all the DevOps movement is orchestrating and accelerating, right? So the goal here is to take other things, right? I mentioned we built a ton of stuff in Puppet, right? So for the majority of the stuff that my teams anyway build and do the automation for, we use Puppet very heavily to do that work. And therefore, we want to be able to just take the Puppet scripts that we've invested so much time in and run them under a blueprint so that they run the exact same way they would if they weren't under a blueprint. So I can build this on my own laptop, or I can use Agility to build it in AWS or on a cloud. Right, and I'm going to check to make sure everything is enforced within that space. Right, so I've got a workflow, I figured out exactly what's going to happen, I'm enforcing everything, I've got the governance piece, and then I deploy it where it belongs. Right, and then I'm looking for, is there a configuration change, right? This is the part where I talked about earlier where that developer nicely checked his code in the wrong way, and some code changed between test and UAT or between dev and test. You're checking for all of that stuff, right? You've got the configuration change, you know exactly what's supposed to be there and what isn't, and you're doing those checks. So, nice, Commonwealth Bank of Australia did a nice quote for us. But basically what you're trying to do is move everything over to innovation, right? So you've got these big, huge monolithic applications. You've got companies that are trying to get stuff out quicker. It's much harder for them. You know, the DevOps term in and of itself has made people change the way they do their companies, right? The way they staff their companies. I had a pretty famous presentation for 6-to-1 plays with staffing, right? The way people are doing the new movement. You know, you can go do a 6-to-1 trade-off within your company to get the people you actually want to do DevOps instead of the people you have today. And in a lot of cases, it's a training your internal people, finding better jobs for them, better places for them. But at the end of the day, it's all about lowering your operating costs while offering more features, getting more revenue from your customers. And that's what this highlights. So what's coming, right? What's in the future? With the agility releases, with all the things that are on the roadmaps that are committing in the next year, right? We're starting to expose a lot more of the advanced services that are available from Amazon. Right? There's a lot of things that customers are asking for. There's a lot of things we just need to make our support of a lot of these customers' environments better and to be able to offer better features. The ELB stuff, obviously, exposing Route 53 for people who need to do a little more advanced playing with their DNS components. Then RDS, all of that will be exposed to the blueprints, will be exposed via the UI as we move forward and get some of these new features rolled in. We're essentially, a hardware company. That's our legacy, right? Big data centers, we got a whole lot of them. It's not the most fun business to be in right now, and people don't necessarily want to grow that way, right? So we're leveraging our relationship very heavily with AWS, with the Red Hat guys for the OpenStack stuff to abstract away the hardware components for the stuff that needs to run in the data center, right? We're moving towards these new, better capabilities to be able to roll out new services faster, right? To be able to build better blueprints, to be able to get this out quicker at the infrastructure layer, right? So whether the infrastructure, whatever it happens to be, we're trying to innovate at that level and provide tools to make it easier for people to embrace these new technologies and the new approaches, to be able to move to the agile side of things. We also are continuing to make all of the UIs much easier, right? Drag and drop stuff, because I next can make it easier that someone else can do it. I won't do any more insulting of people's job titles just in case they have it. But you want to keep moving down the stack, right? I honestly want my 6-year-old to be able to do this, right? And she probably can, at least in the next year anyway, as some of this new stuff comes out, right? That's the goal, is to make this easier and easier for people to do this part of it so they can focus on the fun, innovative stuff, right? I want developers to write code. I do not want them to worry about how to write the correct JDBC control string to connect to the database, and I don't want them to worry about whether it's Oracle 12 or 11 or what they're running, right? Those components should be not something they ever care about seeing. And if you watch the presentation before this, Matt Carroll, we're open sourcing something called Easy Bake, which just makes the database completely abstracted away. But also, we will start adding more of the options and offerings as well. Elastic Beanstalk, Redshift, other things that are coming out from AWS, and these are going to become core parts of what we're offering out there to our clients to solve a lot of the hard problems they have in spinning up quick analytic environments or other things that they may need to do. So I like to leave lots of time for questions and make things interactive. So last slide, and I will open it up to anyone to ask questions that would like to. So somebody be brave. Okay, if you're not brave, then I got to stand up here and look stupid for another 15 minutes. So really, no one has a question? Well, we can end it here if you want. Okay, well, thanks, guys.